Now then, everybody, welcome along. This is Friday Gathering, I'm very happy to say. If you are listening on a Saturday or on a Sunday, fear not, we have carefully tailored the discussion points to not be time-sensitive, akin to a good Sunday paper read. And to that end, John Greene, speaking of Sunday papers, Sunday Independent sports editor, hello.
Joe.
It's Friday, John, you ready?
All set.
Yeah? Pressure on?
Pressure's for tired Joes.
Better be something good this Sunday, John, you know what I mean?
There's always something good.
Well, that's true.
Always something good.
Rory O'Connor of the Irish Independent here in studio, hello.
Hello, Joe.
And Fionn Davenport is a man of many talents, award-winning travel journalist, exceptional broadcaster in his own right. And for the guts of a decade as well, we talked golf on a weekly basis, part of my former life on OTB. And frankly, in my new job, I have no time for friends or family. I thought, how can I see Fionn on the side?
True.
Yes.
How's that work? We get abused when he gets this big intro.
Yes, I know. Exceptional broadcaster, award-winning.
But it is
You
true.
better have something good for Sunday.
And John and Rory.
with friends like Joe, no, never see. Yeah, since I guess in your new life, so this is at least get a chance to see you.
Yeah,
good to see you.
You look well.
Thank you, and you.
Quite a few things on the agenda. Suspect we may not get to everything. So the GPA are happy for managers to officially be compensated, according to Tom Parsons. There is a genuine war of words. I think sometimes with a war of words, we have to squeeze every drop out of the quotes and manipulate them and put them side by side so that we get a bit of bang for our buck. Not required here. This is just a good old-fashioned ding-dong, really. Eileen Gleeson, the Irish manager, versus the Athlone town manager, Kieran Kilduff. The ever-booming experience economy, sport is cashing in. Sir Jim has given Sir Alex the boot. Tennis, Saudi Arabian bonanza, Fionn has been watching that. And IRFU against the 20-minute red card. We will not get to all of this, I think, but we'll see how we go. So, fellas, just to start off with the back page this morning, Colin Keyes has the story. Tom Parsons is the Gaelic Players Association CEO, and he's been doing some talking this week. People may have seen Jarlath Burns, the president, had said recently that the GAA should be open to debating things like contracts for managers, remuneration for managers, and this has been put to Tom Parsons, and he has said, yeah, we are open to this. So, for instance, he quoted a GPA survey last year, and inter-county players were asked, do you think inter-county managers should be, now the key word here is compensated. I would prefer if the word had been paid, because that sounds a bit more lucrative. Compensated, sort of like out of pocket connotations, mileage. Now we're talking about someone told me, and I never know if it's true, that a manager in the last what's a wide enough so I don't libel anyone. An All-Ireland winning manager in the vague past found a ginormous sum of cash in his boot after winning the All-Ireland. Now, who knows if it's true or not, but this is kind of the stuff of
there's a lot of stories around managers and payments, and you never know what's real and what's not.
It's true.
But I think we can take it as the truth is that people are getting paid to manage Gaelic football teams.
I think we can.
Teams.
Yeah.
I think we can.
That's a good starting point.
Tom Parsons said so. He goes, managers already are.
Yes. Yeah. Again, compensated, paid. What's he talking about exactly? Who knows? In answer to the survey, 92% of GAA inter-county players said yes, they should be compensated. And Parsons made the point that there are 350 coaches and games development officers already around the country, so we have professional coaches. In the same breath, he said, our amateur status is important in the GAA. He says the GPA is committed to our amateur status, and we need to work with the GAA on that. He did also interestingly say that they were surveyed, the players, are you kind of happy with the amateur status and the financial rewards at the moment? And 60% said yes, and 40% said no. Now, the specifics of what that 40% are looking for, we don't know. But 60% said, sure, happy enough with the situation.
I thought there's an interesting line of quote, some tier of players do need a stronger value proposition with the amount of investment on and off the field for the inter-county game. I love that marketing speak for...
Yeah, it sounds like it's basically talking about image rights or that kind of idea, that it may not be the GA that's paying them, but that they're getting, we do have it already with brand ambassadors and with sponsors coming in to reward or to pay players for services.
Can I ask, the GA managers are getting mileage, and that's on the record. Are they then also just getting lumps of cash on the side? Is that what's going on? or do we know?
I don't know. We don't know the ins and outs of it, but we know that. Well, I think we're pretty confident that there are transactions happening, and I've always wondered about revenue, looking into it and all that sort of stuff. You know, how does it actually work? Is it? And I think what they're talking about is cleaning it up so that it's salary, that it's all gone through the books, and that there's more transparent. Like, transparency is the one thing that's been missing, because this is as old as time, really.
County boards have been encouraged in the last years to start including how much their inter-county management teams are costing them. Not all of them. In fact, I would say probably most of them haven't yet. But I know there are some examples of county boards who are now putting a figure of what their what their management teams cost them. We always had a figure in county board finances every year, inter-county team expenses, which was this big, huge figure, which covered everything. But counties have been asked to break it down more. And I know, off the top of my head, I can think Meath, and I think Roscommon certainly did that, and included a figure for the management teams. In Meath, I'm going to say it was 70,000, but I can't swear to that. It might have been a little bit more. And that was a figure that covered all payments to people who were members of their inter-county management team.
Goes at the clubs.
It doesn't tell you what those payments were. Were they expenses? Were they vouched expenses? Or, we don't know that yet.
But then there's there's that, and the expenses and vouched expenses. But then I suppose I just feel there is a network whereby, that local business person's also going to look after you. Here's a wink. That's just
there's a car.
It, no?
Here's a car.
Yeah.
So is this a more mature?
So how does somebody who has a car get mileage?
Sure. Okay.
They don't.
So would we like this? Is this a more mature thing? Do we want a scenario where very publicly that the manager of X county is on 150 grand a year? Do you think that's just better that we all know that?
I think so, because it just makes it more straightforward. It makes it less under the table. It makes it less murky. It also, it seems like the commitment involved of being a manager is almost impossible if you want to have being a manager and having a job. I mean, Colin O'Rourke went into Meath after he'd retired, didn't he? But we're seeing the amount of time it takes. It seems to be a full-time job. It seems to why not allow people to go and work as GAA managers if that's the career of choice.
It'll pierce something. I know. So listen, there's a mass delusion, and there's winks and nods, and we're all like, I'm sure he's getting a few quid. And that's the current status. It probably does change the feel of the games to literally look at managers and sidelines and saying, he's on 200 grand a year. So I can see maybe a wolf. I know I'm like subscribing to this kind of lie, which is currently there.
We are all kind of conspirators here, and we do know of examples over the years where an inter-county manager, it was their job. They weren't doing anything else, and yet we're all still clinging to this kind of quaint notion of
amateurism.
Look at the amount of time X is putting into that job. They're so dedicated. They're so committed. Well, but maybe they're getting 70 grand a year. So
it will lead. I mean, I find Parsons' comments quite unusual. That I don't see how the players not getting paid and the manager getting paid in the long term is going to work. Maybe there will be maybe it will be split. Like if the manager's getting paid and he's not doing a good job, then it's going to come a bone of contention within dressing rooms. And it was the case in college football, like in America.
The players are sitting there and they know the manager's getting paid.
That's true.
They mightn't have a figure, but there'll be dressing room banter and talk about roughly how much, especially if it's known there's a benefactor, which is often how this might, or a supporters club or something. But I don't see it a huge leap for the group of players, knowing that their manager gets paid and knowing exactly what their manager
might depend how much he's getting paid.
Yeah,
but it's true. I have sympathy for Parsons' comments because he's trying to thread a particularly tough needle.
He is.
And there's it's almost as though that we've been living for as long as I've been alive in this, in a full national version of Inspector Renault. Shocked to discover that there's gambling going on in this establishment. But it feels as like, and tiptoeing around it, because obviously we have to be careful about saying anything scabrous. But at the same time, I've also heard the stories for years, but going back like 30, 40 years. about, always little side deals being
And,
cut to.
and would it been officially there in black and white that manager's getting 250 grand a year? Would that take a certain sheen off things?
I mean, what did I see in the paper today that GAA Go had healthy, what are they, revenue of 5 million?
Nearly 5 million. Right. Yeah.
And what you're looking, when you have numbers attached to the GAA in the millions now, and big turnovers and big numbers being discussed, it just seems so anomalous to me that then you have the nuts and bolts are sitting there going, no, not me, I'm just doing it because,
But the GAA is an extraordinary organisation for being able to be at the same time socialist and capitalist.
At the one time. Yeah.
Well, we'll see where it goes. I think
Tom Parsons, to be fair to him, he couldn't really have said anything else, could he?
No.
I mean, because it would have been just
a lie.
Yeah. And
so
to be fair to him too,
there is a degree of we have to face reality.
We have to face reality.
But we haven't had to face it for the last 100 years. So why are we facing it now?
And we're not good at that.
But isn't Jarlath Burns such an interesting and breath of fresh air in that, he's not saying, I think it's important that we have this discussion unless there is a kind of a giant contradiction or a giant hypocrisy at play that, come on, lads.
Because there was, you'll remember specifics, John, but there was a point a couple of years ago where Pádraig Duffy, who was then the, what's the official title?
Ardstúr.
Yeah. And he sort of said, listen, we need to decide on this payments under the table situation as an association. Are we going to go after this or will we just sort of leave it as is? And the overwhelming response was, let's just leave it as is.
Well, the old it was silence, which was the Irish way of saying.
Yeah. And some of the managers aren't going to want to pay tax on this cash in their boot.
No, they're going to want to be paid more so that the tax.
And county boards may look for more. They may look for them to be almost director of football type roles. That when you're not managing the county team, that you're also have an eye over all of these other elements.
It's across all levels of the GAA, as all adult levels of the GAA, right down to the junior B club teams.
Yeah. But it will inevitably shine a light on amateurism and whether amateurism is sustainable in the future and whether we can, the sport can continue to ask so much of people in a world where everyone has less time and everyone, the players I'm talking about, and it will, I think, especially when the figures are published, as I kind of touched on earlier, in college football, the highest paid people in nearly every public servants in nearly every state in America are college football coaches or college basketball coaches, and eventually the NCAA they broke and they started paying players because the players just got fed up with not getting anything for.
To your point, Joe, if you fast forward 10 years, let's say we have an agreement, is that the better resource counties are all of a sudden grabbing all of the best managerial talent to the detriment of the lesser resource counties. And then all of a sudden that ethos that infuses the GAA for 100 plus years is just blown away completely.
Yeah.
But the best resourced counties are already winning the majority of All Ireland. So it's just putting facts behind what we already know. I mean, Limerick have incredible resources. Dublin have the best resources of anyone. They've been hoovering up All Irelands for years. So it's more just putting a name on what we've already been seeing.
Homegrown managers.
It's true. Absolutely.
So say the Pep Guardiola of GAA emerges in Leitrim.
Yeah.
They can just go get him. Yeah. In a very official way.
Exactly.
Yeah, they could. It's like England going after Thomas Tuchel.
Yeah.
It's the same. But I think that it's not currently maybe manifesting itself in managers, but what they are doing is putting their resources behind the intercounty setups in a way that a Leitrim can't do.
It's true. Let's move on. So then, beside that story from Colm Keys, there's a picture of Eileen Gleeson. It sounds like my prep for this panel was glancing at the back page of the Irish Independent. I assure you it wasn't. Far more busy than that. Yeah. So there's a picture of Eileen Gleeson. She's naming a squad because next week, and this is a big deal, the Euro 2025 first playoff game is against Georgia. We do have the prospect in women's sport of a Rugby World Cup and the Euros next year with teams at both, which would be quite something. So the headline is Gleeson hits back. If he wants dialogue, then pick up the phone. So it's a sharp riposte. And the person she's directing it at is the Athlone Town, by the way, they're League of Ireland champions this year, manager, Kieran Kilduff. So Kilduff very recently had talked about this big disconnect between the domestic game and the international setup. He talked about the lack now of home-based sessions for emerging players, which had been happening, lack of contact from the FAI generally. He talked about no pathway, no connection between the national team and the league. He noted, look, I won the league here with Athlone, didn't get so much as a call from Eileen Gleeson. This was all put to Eileen Gleeson in her press conference yesterday. She didn't like it. What am I calling him about? I'm not selecting his players, she said. She has included his goalkeeper, Katie Keane, but that's beside the point. She says there are hundreds of managers. Again, I don't know if there are hundreds of managers, but she says there are hundreds of managers. I'm speaking to players that we need to. If I need to ask Kieran about a player, I'll pick up the phone and ring him. If he wants to ring, ring. There's nothing stopping him. If he wants the dialogue, then pick up the phone and call me. You should have brought Kieran today, she says at one point when she's getting a bit fed up of the questioning. This is a squad announcement. I'm done talking about Kieran Kilduff. And she did add, in fairness to her, we do get data on a player if we're interested, so that Kieran may not have heard from me, may not be the full picture. So a genuine, I think, bite
Barney.
back. Yeah, genuine Barney.
Like Kilduff is in such a position of power because Kilduff is an established figure in the men's game who has multiple league titles, who I'd say he's even spoken about how he sees this as his first management job and he enjoys working in the women's game, but I think his ambitions will be to work within the Men's League of Ireland. So he's not really beholden to the FAI or Eileen Gleeson to kind of rise through the ranks. He's probably in quite a powerful position in that way. And Gleeson's in her dream job and then suddenly this guy's coming out and kind of chipping away at her. So she's reacting, seems like very defensively. And I think she could have handled it better. In my view, it does. It just seems like the women's teams, women's game seems to be constantly, maybe it's Irish football in general, seems to be constantly at war with itself. They get to a World Cup and the players fall out with the manager, and it's a, what should be a good news story is a very human story, in that there's big personalities involved that are kind of having a go at each other. So, it's quite stark reading those comments.
Yeah. I don't really know, because I'm not behind the scenes, I don't really know where to come down on the dispute between Kilduff and Eileen Gleeson. I mean, if she was here and she said, look, I don't need to talk to him. I see his players. If I want to pick one of them, I can pick them. I get data on players. I have picked Katie Keane. I didn't phone him when he won the league. I'm the Irish manager. I don't really need to necessarily. Maybe it's the wrong thing to say, but part of me thinks this is good for the women's game in a broader sense, that these spats and this soap opera quality is exactly what powers the men's game and the popularity of it. And so a good old-fashioned back page Barney. Again, I want Irish football to be run coherently and well, but it's no harm. I mean, if Eileen Gleeson just named the squad and everything's happy, it's not on the back page. And so, I know we're all saying, well, you hate to see this kind of thing, but it's precisely what you love to see.
Well, here's the other side of it, which is that we're talking about it a couple of minutes now, and the actual origin of this is that Athlone Town are playing Shells in the Women's FAI Cup final on Sunday, and Kilduff did an interview in advance of the game, and these comments at the interview is actually in the Sunday Independent on Sunday, and these are comments contained in that interview which came out a bit earlier. So this is the first time we've mentioned that there's a cup final on Sunday. I've looked at his comments, and my initial thought was, look, you've gone in over the top there. I couldn't believe that he got a response the way he did, to be honest with you. I don't think that was very edifying on Eileen Gleeson's part as national team manager and as the figurehead of the women's game in the country. But when you look at his comments closely, he probably has a point. He may have been able to make it a little bit differently. I don't think anybody reasonably thinks that the national team manager in any sport needs to be phoning up club managers all the time or whatever. But his deeper point about pathways for women, girls and women playing football, kind of got overlooked a little bit in the spat. But I think that was, and as Rory said, he's probably going to be leaving that world at some point in the not too distant future into the other world of men's football. So he's doing it from a point of, I think, genuine concern about how women's football is going to develop in this country. And to me, it's just another one of those silly Irish football spats that nobody wants, and that I would say that, the FAI are probably putting, head and hands, oh God, this is the last thing we need.
Why do you think Gleeson went so strong yesterday? Because she could have really played all this down very nicely.
Look, I don't know. Yeah. It almost felt personal between them. I don't know.
Very defensive.
I thought she could have probably handled it a bit differently, and not more diplomatically, but with a little bit more authority and a little bit more sort of recognition of the position that she holds in the Irish game.
No, it's a proper put down.
In simple terms, she could have been bigger than that, I think.
Okay.
It does look like the women's game is making a lot of the same mistakes that the men's game made in terms of we're exporting our talent to England and hoping that they get and elsewhere. In fairness,
that's one of the points he makes. Actually, is about the league. This is a relatively new thing. We have a chance. Like one of his points is, we have a chance not to make to not make the mistakes that the men's game have made.
I would point out, by the way, under Vera Pauw's tenure, the absolutely straightforward message to the players was get into the UK or get into a stronger league.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, if you want to play for me, staying at home.
Which is what we've been telling our men for, our men's players for a long time.
But I understand Vera Pauw saying that because, okay, long-term strategy, would you like a thriving and high-standard domestic league? Of course you would. But Vera Pauw, I'm here for the next 2-3 years.
Yeah, while in the meantime.
Yeah, get over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you make of it all, Fionn?
I kind of agree with John. I think the argument is almost as always just like it's a kind of not hurtful is the wrong word, but a kind of a pointed reminder that women's football here is not even an afterthought. It's kind of at that international level. So I don't know. I was thinking, is Heimer going to ring whoever wins the league? You know what I mean? Or did Gareth Southgate ring Guardiola to congratulate him on?
What I'd say in defence though of Eileen Gleeson is, she is not Heimer, who's never even stepped. Well, actually, to be fair, he's attended quite a few League of Ireland games now. But Eileen Gleeson is of this country's female footballing culture. She's been absolutely ensconced in it for her entire career. So maybe a part of her is actually, her back is up because she's thinking, this fella's calling me out.
So that's what I was going to say. Is that like for Eileen Gleeson, it's like, oh, come on, you're reading into this something that just isn't there. Like, I didn't ring you not because I want to disrespect you. I didn't ring you because, to be honest, I didn't think about it. Like, if you want to chat, call me. You have my number. Just ring me anytime you want.
I didn't get the sense she actually did want him to call her.
No, probably not.
like the Irish rugby system is a pretty aligned system. Andy Farrell will be on the phone to all 4 provincial coaches, finding out about players all the time. That his coaching ticket now, it's 4 teams. It's much easier, and they will attend training.
But that is his base, though.
No, it's absolutely his base.
Whereas the League of Ireland for Eileen Gleeson, it's not her playing base.
No, but it's a small playing pool overall, and she is selecting one of his players in her squad, so it's not beyond the realms that there's players there who may go to England in the next year or two that she would view. So I don't think Kieran Kilduff is looking for 3 cheers from Eileen Gleeson. He's not looking for some champagne to be sent to the dressing room. It sounds like he's fighting for his players. He's saying to his players, the Irish team aren't looking at you, so I'm going to go out and make a point of it. And I think it's more what the message is. And would it cost her too much to be checking in with the League of Ireland managers on a regular basis, particularly those at the high level, to go, what have you got? Who have you got for me? What's she like? What she like? It doesn't seem like, international management is not a busy job from one week to another. It doesn't seem like it would cost her too much to pick up the phone and keep a relationship going.
I suppose the worrying aspect, and you could aim this at the two of them, is if there was a sincere effort to try and improve the situation, they would have done this privately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He could have rang her and said, listen, Eileen, you may not be aware, this is sort of how I'm feeling. And she, on seeing his comments, may have picked up the phone and said, Kieran, listen, no slight intended, didn't really, I'm watching the players, I'm watching the game, sorry. But actually, instead, it's...
Yeah, but this is the point, isn't it? It does point to some kind of a dysfunction in Irish women's football.
The experience economy is something we touched on during the week on a Bits and Bobs episode, and I just thought it would be interesting on a few fronts, not least because 80,000 went to a Leinster-Munster game at the weekend, because Fionn, as a travel journalist, this is kind of the world to an extent you inhabit, and John, because you're here, you can... So the Ryder Cup tickets at Bethpage Black are $750 per day, which is a hell of a jump from Rome, $250, and they've cited things like macroeconomic pressures, post-COVID supply chain, the war in Ukraine, etc. But it just seems like a bit of a shakedown, I think, is everybody's consensus. And I was mentioning during the week there was a good piece by James Marriott in the London Times back around the time of the Oasis prices, and he was talking about the experience economy and the extent to which it's booming. And there's now a fairly well accepted trend that people would sooner splurge on experience over possessions. And he had mentioned an Evening Standard report citing a huge surge in ultra expensive restaurants in London. So the kind of 150 sterling per plate meal is now really booming in London. And he said as well, akin to Ryder Cup tickets, I think it's not just uber wealthy people who are forking out. There's an aspirational middle class aspect to this as well. And that is because people want to have an experience and they want to be able to post about it online. And, you know, he goes into thoughtful places and talks about how we do lack a bit of ritual in the absence of religion increasingly. We lack a kind of set piece event to take us out of ordinary life. Lack of community, friendships. He said if you lack friends, a year can easily drift by in grey uniformity, your work, commute, screens. And so a Taylor Swift concert, it's a concert, but it's a community. And Dublin is love-bombed and people are practically hugging strangers. And obviously that applies to sport. I mean, if you're lonely or if life's a bit mundane or colourless, to plug into supporting a team with fellow fans is, you know, an obvious appeal. He does conclude, by the way, he doesn't want to deny the fun of expensive restaurants and concerts. It's just to suggest the huge quantities of money people are forking out are a sign that we are loading these experiences with more significance than they can properly bear. So I guess if he had written this over the week, his conclusion would have been, don't pay $750 for a day at the Ryder Cup. But people are doing it. And it's going to be something that sport, I suspect, can take advantage of. Fionn, you're seeing the cold face of this, obviously, with tourism, which is the ultimate kind of experience.
Yeah, expensive holidays, people going on bust the budget holidays, etc. Funflation, don't they call it?
Yeah.
It's an interesting one. It bucks economic trends that go back really since the birth of capitalism. So when there is like straightened economic times, like cost of living has gone up, rents are higher, energy costs have gone up, etc., etc. Traditionally, like when you look at the cycle of how economics works, is people tighten their belts, but not now. So this is an interesting one. Economists are kind of fascinated by this because in the post-pandemic world, and sometimes the pandemic can do an enormous amount of heavy lifting about kind of behavioral shifts, but there seems to be a fixed behavioral shift on foot of the pandemic experience. Where, as you said, people put greater value on experiences and are willing to spend the money. And like often, and maybe this is over-egging the custard slightly, but it feels to me that it's a natural response to the existential dread that so many of us feel about an uncertain future, about the inability to buy a home, about climate change and what's the future going to be. So there's a sense that like for a lot of middle-class people, here, elsewhere, there's a sense, you know what, to hell with it. Like, and the example was my wife is a big Taylor Swift fan. I'm not. I couldn't care less about Taylor Swift. But when I got an opportunity to get Taylor Swift tickets, I jumped at it, not because I care. And sure, it was part of it was I wanted to give my wife the experience, but I was really curious about that shared collective experience that a Taylor Swift concert offers, even though the music itself is kind of irrelevant to me. And 3.5 hours of like whatever it was, 50,000 people screaming their heads off is a compelling thing.
And I presume documenting our lives online is a huge attraction as well.
That's a big part of it as well. I mean, I think
you did post from the Taylor Swift concert.
Oh yeah, sure.
Did,
Look, it's all those clicks.
You
Joe.
did.
It's all about those clicks.
I saw.
But the idea that Taylor Swift, who when she came here at the last cycle of concerts, it's like couldn't give away the tickets. Now all of a sudden it's generating $5 billion in consumer spending. And it's not just Taylor Swift. In slight defense of the Ryder Cup thing, because at Marco Simone at the Ryder Cup here is that they didn't make nearly as much money as they thought they were going to make. You know, and because I think the expenses were 40% higher than they had been at Le National at the last European Ryder Cup.
Yeah.
So, you know, like it's a weird one. And then you add things like all of a sudden with the Oasis tickets, it's kind of put the spotlight on dynamic pricing, and it just becomes very like. The thing is, it's a worrying trend in some respects because it's like it's an easy trend to take advantage of.
Yes.
The consumers become such easy marks then.
And sorry to interrupt, just a last one from me. I saw Hustle surveyed 350 people who were leaving. I don't remember who the artist was, but it was a very expensive concert. And so of that 350, which is a reasonable sample size, nearly half, 40% of them said the experience had been tainted by the constant knowledge of just how much they were being ripped off and just how much they had forked over. Because Conan during the week was saying one of his favourite things is to go to a club match and to pay your tenner. Because you don't feel like you're being absolutely screwed over. There's a kind of a pleasant aspect to being invited in. I dare say League of Ireland, it's a different concept to the New Zealand tickets, which we'll be talking about, I guarantee you, the week of the game.
Oh, absolutely.
How expensive are they up to now?
They're 135, I think.
And no problem selling that out. I wouldn't be shocked if the IRFU were sitting around going, $750 for a rider? Why are we not charging
They
$250?
have that delicate balance of being a governing body, and the GAA has this as well, where you have to strike a balance. It would be very difficult for them to go surge pricing, for example, because the negative PR that would bring.
Would it though?
Yeah, I think so. I'm sure they've looked at it. I'm sure they're tempted by it. I mean, they don't sell their tickets on Ticketmaster anyway. Their tickets go via the clubs.
Yeah.
A lot of clubs, especially at All Blacks game, notices went out to members saying you're not getting tickets through us because we've basically bundled these up and given them to corporates. I think the attraction of everyone wants to film the haka and put it on their social media. People with no interest in rugby want to experience that. And the All Blacks game will always have that cachet, whereas the other three games, as far as I'm aware, are not fully sold out just yet. So maybe the Australia game is. But the IRFU, we're only 12 years since the Aviva opened. They put the ticket prices too high and they couldn't sell out the place. It's in Sexton's book. The first couple of games were really underwhelming.
There was an
and they had to apologise.
All-time recession then. And I think to be fair, the experience economy has exploded since then. Yeah, there is that thirst and hunger. Ronan Mullen during the week also made a point, which I thought was very valid, is that there are a big swathe of people now, even up to their 30s, maybe early 40s, but certainly 30s and 20s, who have almost given up buying a house. It's just so far beyond them. But they're professionals with disposable income.
Yeah.
That's why I was going to say, money to spend.
And I take your point, Fionn. There is a lot of disposable income out there among a certain group of people, a very large group of people. I personally, I don't understand it. I recently I wanted to see a concert. There was a particular concert I wanted to see.
Who?
David Gilmour, the guitarist from Pink Floyd, was doing a concert in Rome, and this was my idea of, this is something I really, really, really want to do. And the tickets started at about 700.
Oh, John. Whew.
And I said, no.
No, yeah.
That's just mental.
I'm not doing it.
Because it would have tainted the experience if you
I don't know, because it's a good point. I hadn't thought of that point. Well, but I just said no, and I really would like to. I really, really would have gone to it. But I know a group of guys, you may even have done this, Fionn, but I know a group of guys who went to the Masters this year, and it was like they were away for 4 or 5 days, and it was one day at the Masters and then golf the other days in the general area. I can't remember the cost of it, but it was well in the thousands for this, well in the thousands, And I thought they might regret it, They came back and they said it was a phenomenal experience, and the biggest mistake they made was that they didn't go for an extra 2 days.
Yeah, fair point, because it's easy to look at the trend and say, God, people are really missing something in the core of their lives and treat it that way. But
you kind of have to tell people you had a great time, though, didn't you? If you spent that much money and you've gone all that way, you kind of, if internally you're resting with the decision, you kind of have to go, oh, no, it was brilliant. And
I think people would be honest enough to say, look, being honest with you, I wouldn't do it again. But no, these were very much so. I'd like to go for 7 days.
It's the most expensive thing we ever.
And golf is a hard sell. I mean,
sure. The Masters is different.
It is, I suppose.
The most expensive thing we ever splurged on, house and cars aside, was our honeymoon. And it was very expensive. I mean, we really kind of my instinct would have been, and this is like a failing on my part, my instinct would have been, let's just do 2 weeks in Italy or something. And my partner, my wife said, no, do you know what? Let's go holiday of a lifetime. And this was in 2019. So it turned out the timing was very prescient with COVID. And so we went to South Africa for a week, Kenya for a week, which involved safari in Nairobi, and then to round it off, Seychelles for a week.
Why not?
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And
go big or go home, Joe.
But every other holiday we've ever been on, we are literally 2 weeks in Mallorca, 2 weeks in Spain types, modest, normal holidays. But we just decided to go big. I have to say, still, it's the best thing I ever did. So I look back in it now, and we still look at the photos. We still talk about it. Like, it's not to consign these experiences to say, God, the other 50 weeks of the year, your life is really missing out on something. But it is just to note that capitalism being what it is, people have realised we can charge whatever the hell they want.
Yeah,
Do you think this is just a moment in time, and do you think this will fizzle out?
I don't know.
Or are we gone down a road now and there's no turning back from it?
I don't know. It's hard to. I mean,
Would
it's hard
you both of you are really, really keen. You love golf, and you like going to golf tournaments.
No, I don't like going to golf tournaments.
Okay, right. Because I've been to a few, and it's not actually that enjoyable.
No, golf is the worst sport.
So would you pay
to watch
Would you
live.
pay as a golf fan $750 for a day at the Ryder Cup?
Absolutely.
No.
John, I wouldn't pay $200.
Okay.
No.
We were on a family holiday in 1998, and we were in Paris. We were in Paris, and we were driving off the Periférique, and we spotted the Stade de France, and Dad just pulled the car down, and we went down, and Nigeria were playing Denmark the following night, and we walked down and into the middle of Saint-Denis, where you're kind of not supposed to go, and we went into the mairie, and he asked for 4 tickets for the game, and then found out how much they cost, and looked at me and closed his eyes and gave him the money, and that was one of the family experiences that we'll always look back on as being amazing. 2014, Ireland toured Argentina. The World Cup was on in Brazil. I finished covering the tour and flew into Brazil to Rio for 4 nights and hung out with Dan McDonald and kind of a couple of journalists I knew. But Argentina were playing Bosnia in the Maracanã, and I went out with a wad of cash and stood on the side of the road and tried to buy tickets. Like, I think I had something like 600 or 700 quid in my pocket, which you're not really supposed to do in Rio. I didn't get tickets, and I missed a 1-1 draw between Bosnia and Argentina. A chance to see Messi at the World Cup. I was so relieved because I watched the game. I didn't see the game because I was standing on the side of the road, but I was so relieved that I didn't spend that money.
I was
because
at
it was
that game.
we were at that game. Yeah. Like, it was nothing.
No, it's
like
fine.
it was kind of like I would have been able to go home and say I saw Messi at the World Cup, but actually I saw 1-1 draw between Argentina and Bosnia. Like, it would have been cool, but it wasn't worth the money. So it's weird. I don't know.
It is weird. I thought actually, if you had asked your question a different way, John, the $750 at the Ryder Cup could have been different. If you had said to me, would you pay $750 to go with your father on a trip to America?
Yeah, but that's a completely different.
It is different, but
thing.
but that's how people view sporting events. They do bring, particularly males, I suppose, they do bring generations and family and friends together. Trips to the Euros or World Cups. You're therefore, to be fair to people, you got to give people credit. They're not just paying to be at the match just to see Messi. Me and my dad.
Well, yeah, me, my dad, and my son went to the All Ireland this year.
Yeah, so that's very special then.
Yeah, and it's like 3 Johns in a row. I don't know, like I said to you earlier, I think I may have been 3 or something. 4 anyway when I was at my first All Ireland football final, and it's always been a thing with me. And that was brilliant to be able to do that. You know,
what would you draw the line at for an All Ireland ticket now? You and your father and your son. What would you pay?
What were they this year? They were 100 quid, weren't they?
Yeah. What can I get you up to?
Yeah, I'd go more than that. Yeah.
Would you go
100 quid is nothing.
Would you go 250 each?
Oh,
It's you and your dad and your son.
yeah.
Do you know? See, this is what I mean.
See, he's making me feel bad.
Joe's working for the.
That's how it works.
But yeah, I think that's. I don't think that's. I think you're into the realm of you're well, okay. We won't be watching 15 men behind the ball anymore, hopefully. But yeah, I think no, 250 ahead is
Too much.
Because it was the Ryder Cup tickets that prompted the conversation. The weird thing about golf is that, like, if you go to a sporting event, all of you, whether you have bad seats behind a pillar or are sitting pitch side, you'll see the winning goal or you'll see the thing. When you go to a golf tournament, and particularly the Ryder Cup, you could be, 3,000 yards away from the winning putt and go, what? Oh, it's over.
The last time I met Fionn was in Glen Eagles.
We went to Glen Eagles.
2014.
Yeah.
And I don't have many memories of that weekend, but I do remember that my best seat for the action ended up being in the big tented area where
Watching
the big
it on
screens
TV.
were.
Yeah.
Well, the Ryder Cup's the worst of luck because often only 4 matches on at one time.
Yeah.
The crowd aren't spread out at all.
But to the broader point, in the end, everyone makes a decision about whether how much money is going to see Messi worth. I remember going to the quarterfinal of Chelsea-Barcelona in Barcelona, whatever year that was, 2005.
But the Torres goal or before that?
No. It was
See,
the
you
return.
can't even remember.
No, I can't remember, but I went only to see this young Tyro Messi. That was it. And I was in Barcelona. We went to Barcelona specifically for the few nights.
So I've seen Messi a bunch of times.
Yeah. But the point is that like, so that hype, like in the end, now it becomes just kind of an Arsenal anecdote where you kind of go, yeah, I saw Messi play, but I don't really remember. I remember him doing something nice down in the corner, but like, you know, I've seen him do that 10,000 times on TV. But it's about that thing where you're kind of almost, you're no longer making conscious decisions. It's interesting that you drew the line, even though I'm assuming you're a big Pink Floyd fan and the chance to see Dave Gilmour was something maybe that you've been looking forward to for a long time, but you drew the line at 700 quid.
Yeah.
But there's lots of people who kind of convince themselves otherwise. And to that point, a lot of the ticket sellers know this. So the way it's working now is those, you know, those premium packages that are first on sale, they know that there is the super fan who will lose their minds and pay whatever it is within a relative amount of reason that is fast going further and further out. And they will send them that premium ticket. Oh, you get to stand within, say, 50 feet of the star, and we'll give you like a little box of swag, send it to your house. And all of a sudden there, you're 500 quid poorer. Because they know that fan exists, that person exists, and that's a really dangerous thing because it just creates this kind of like frenzies.
Yeah.
But we have tunnel seats in Premier League grounds now where you can kind of watch what goes on in the tunnel and, you know, different stadiums. I do think in Ireland, like if we're going to go down the route of experience sport or sporting events, the stadia are not really like the game is the event still.
Yes,
like the stadia are not really set up for
Yeah,
it. And the GAA has not.
We don't really know what we're talking about really when it comes to like what was the Leinster Munster thing? Was a few fireworks.
Yeah,
on the side
and Mike McCarthy doing his pre-game act, and that's kind of. And I think Leinster are probably more advanced than anyone in that sort of.
Why did that game sell out? It's an interesting one.
The Munster Leinster.
Yeah,
I think there's this. Well, I think we know from covering like there is a huge latent interest in Irish rugby, and you do have most of the best.
there's a Croke Park factor as well.
The Croke Park is huge.
There's a curiosity and a kind of a warmth towards Croke Park in the
It
Irish
doesn't
sporting.
transpose to the GAA a lot of the time. Like the GAA hasn't tapped into this experience thing at all. Really, I know the Munster Hurling Championship has an experience element to it, but until we get to semi-final, people don't seem to want to go to Croke Park. It's quite unusual.
I used to go all the time, and I stopped going in the last 2 years.
Yeah.
I think this weekend there does seem to be a bit of an event thing happening. I've got friends who are texting going, will we go this weekend
to see the
experimental, the law things.
15 quid the tickets.
Yeah, for 2 days. Yeah. I think what happened is I think there was a 50,000 cohort rugby fans. Jump at this. And then I think the event frenzy kicked in.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of extras.
Well, the game regularly attracts between 40 and 50.
Yeah, it's a 50,000 game.
But I think another 20, 30 said, oh, this is now an event. And it's back to that thing of I need to be there. That impulse that we have.
It was unusual, not a bit of novelty.
Yeah.
And I made 1.7 million for Leinster.
Oof.
So
let's see where it all goes. I somehow don't think sport prices are going to come down anytime soon. Clock's sort of against us. Fionn, you touched on Sir Jim.
Obviously it was a well remarked upon story during the week that Jim Radcliffe has decided that's it, Fergie, you're out of here. You're 2 million that you were getting a year,
and he was getting 2.1 million in 2014.
Yeah,
I would suspect
it's gone down.
That crept up.
Oh, up!
I don't think you'd start paying him less with inflation.
No, probably not.
So that means over 10 years he's banked somewhere between 20 and 30 million.
What was the motivations of the Glazers giving Alex Ferguson
hush money?
Is it? Yeah, you think?
Absolutely. Listen, Alex.
Yeah.
Club ambassador.
There's going to be a lot of managers who mightn't do so well over the next 10 years. We need you not talking in the media.
It's a weird thing, and for all of that, and I reflexively, all the United friends who go, I can't believe they treated not just a club legend, but the club legend, the greatest. But the fact is conservatively, they've given him 25 million quid to do nothing. Just sit there and, shake hands with a couple of rich guys who show up at football matches. But when you actually dig into it, is that for all of Fergie's success, and
he's done more than Anthony, and he cost 80 million.
Huh?
He's done more than Anthony in that time, and he cost 80 million.
But at the same time, is that if the club wants to and needs to renew itself, they need rid of him.
Absolutely.
They need rid of him. Arsene Wenger, when he left Arsenal, didn't show up to the Emirates Stadium for years. He didn't come. He didn't come back.
You wouldn't have Ferguson at games?
No. Ferguson should be retired. Or certainly he can come to the games. They'll give him a free. But like he should not be involved in. The
He shouldn't be anywhere near the dressing room.
Shouldn't be anywhere near. And also as well as when you, and this is not to look. Ferguson's the greatest manager that has ever managed in England. But this is a man who brought enormous success to the club, but also used the club as his own personal fiefdom, and kind of did a lot of stuff over the years that you'd be like, "Are you kidding me?" Like when Preston North End fired Darren, like he recalls the 3 United players straight away.
Yeah,
he allowed Preston to train at Carrington. He decided to go toe to toe with Magnier and McManus over Rock of Gibraltar. Like, how are any of those things in promoting Manchester United? They're not. And that's fine. Alex Ferguson gets a huge amount of leeway because he is the legendary figure that he is. But I would imagine if I'm Jim Ratcliffe, I'm going, look, like I've just invested 2 point whatever billion quid into this club. We need to remake it. We need to get back to success. And sorry, Alex, but you got to go.
John, you're a Manchester United fan. You would have obviously lived through Ferguson's.
Yeah, I agree.
Time.
I agree.
Oh, you do?
I do. I think he shouldn't be anywhere. He should be at the matches, of course.
Yeah,
he's the most important figure in the club's history, along with Busby, and Charlton. But when you've read the stuff back in the day about Busby when he was hanging around after his time was done, like Frank O'Farrell, these guys, they could never escape his, same with Liverpool, they could never escape his, but Liverpool handled it a bit better, you know.
Liverpool.
But they were ruthless with
Busby's
chances.
shadow even hung over Ferguson at the start of his reign. That was how long it can't be good when you come into that situation to have him walking around the dressing room and stuff. But in terms of being at a game and stuff, he's an important figure in the club history, and it would be odd if he wasn't at the games.
And I should just tell listeners, by the way, when you say the dressing room, that has been a literal change this week. There's a change of policy now.
Yeah.
That traditionally at Manchester United, going back to the days of Busby, the board were very much welcomed in the dressing room. You would often have seen Bobby Charlton in there down the years. It's part of the DNA of the club.
Bobby Charlton being in a dressing room, I can see, an inspirational player.
Well, they've banned the entire board now.
Yeah, he was a director.
The board are
of the club.
gone. Morris Watkins, all these guys.
And also,
that policy's gone.
How does it look when you've just let go 250 people from the club? Like, people with mortgages, people, I'm assuming to whom the wage they earned working for Manchester United made a material difference to their lives. Like Alex Ferguson, he's Richard Midas. He does it. It's fine. Like, what does it look to kind of pay him whatever it is they're paying him?
But I don't know so much about that because it's football and there's always inequalities of scale in play.
Sure.
Anyway, these people were working with people who were earning 400,000 a week. So,
but you're giving 2 million a year to the past when you should be investing that in the future.
And I think that's a good point. I think
I just think I actually couldn't believe he still had the kind of access that he still had at the
It was
club.
quite telling when he was sitting in that line. Remember at the Aston Villa game where
was down
they
at the
had
bottom.
like the Politburo, but he was still there.
he was there.
Maybe he was about to be elbowed off. But this line of great decision makers and high performance people, and there's Alex Ferguson at the end of it was just
I'm not a business person. He's still a non-executive director. So to what extent that means he's still involved in some decision making is possibly open to interpretation. And he will, by the way, keep his director's box and his table for 8.
which is
at Old Trafford.
And that's fine
and that's
too.
as it should be.
But he may still be like consulted with football decisions, although I suspect probably less so.
I can't imagine.
No, I imagine that part of Radcliffe's thing is like, look, as Rory correctly said, it's like, what are you spending all this money on the past? And the thing is,
In this crumbling stadium with this crumbling
2
team.
million's not that much money.
how long before he's on the overlap?
oh, that's a good point.
That'd be a good episode.
He's just done Ali McCoist's new TNT podcast show. So yeah, I don't
Roy
know.
might take a week off that week.
I mean, that is the holy grail, isn't it?
That might be the end of the overlap because it'll never recover from
Force them just to hug. I don't think Roy ever will.
it. No,
Ever.
no.
I don't know.
You think?
I don't know. I literally don't know.
I'd
But
be shocked.
would you be shocked?
Shocked, yeah.
I just after a while, this is
One
like,
of them would have to go too far to get the other, to prompt the other to reciprocate. And I
If
can't
only
see
that
either
it
of
would
them.
puncture images, by relenting and.
I mean,
letting
Peter
bygones be
Schmeichel was
bygones.
on it recently, and there was no love lost between him and Roy.
No.
So
Yeah, I think that was a different kind of.
No.
Friction.
It's the betrayal of a father, isn't it? That's ultimately. I mean, there's something Greek and tragic about it.
Not to put too fine a point on it.
But it is that like, and interestingly enough, on the Rock of Gibraltar stuff, it was Roy Keane who urged Fergie don't go toe to toe with these guys. What are you doing? You know not what you do, Sir Alec. Or Gaffer. Again, it's not to disrespect Alex Ferguson, but at the same time, this is like shouldn't be anywhere near the club, really.
Okay, interesting. Okay, final thing or two to mention very, very quickly. We might talk about this more next week, Rory, on rugby, but it's just a bit of breaking news, so we thought, it's interesting. IRFU have followed the French. There's been talk for some time now. Matt Williams often points to rugby league as a great example of how this works very well. Obviously, in rugby these days, there are now more red cards than ever. There used to be no red cards in rugby. Yeah. You could do what you want, but now the game is trying to get more safe, and so red cards are a feature in almost every game, or there's a contentious decision in almost every game. So people have said, okay, this is messing with the equilibrium of the game, and there's been a proposal for a 20-minute red card. So you're down to 14 men for 20 minutes and then you replace the player who's been sent off. And so World Rugby have been trialling this in kind of underage games, and, it could be in the offing. So the IRFU is against it. We do not support the permanent adoption of the 20-minute red card, player safety and welfare, etc. Now, they do like the idea in autumn. And I actually think I didn't realise this was coming for autumn. I think this is really clever. So for these November internationals, if you're the referee, you have both options. You can give a straight red card, or if you think it's one of those orange ones, those in between yellow and red, you can go with the 20-minute red card, and then they can bring on a sub after 20 minutes. And so the RFU is saying, do you know what? That's okay with us. Let's see how that goes in November.
They held their counsel until the decision had been made, whereas France came out quite forcefully earlier in the week saying this is just wrong. Okay. This is against player safety, player welfare, all that sort of stuff. The RFU, as is its wont, was quietly working behind the scenes to try and get this. It's a bit of a climb down, I think, because the initial plan was to follow the Rugby Championship and instigate this 20-minute red card as a proper trial. Now, where I would think this might run into problems is we now have three options. So a referee, John takes Fionn's head off, a referee walks up, looks at the footage, and now has three options. He's got, penalty only. I suppose there's four options. No offence, penalty only, yellow card, 20-minute red. Sorry, there's five here. 20-minute red card or a full-on red card, which is the same colour as the red card. He will be mic'd up, so he will be able to communicate with the entire stadium, which is good because people in the ground will at least know what's going on. I'm not sure. John asked me earlier before I came in, and I haven't been able to clarify if the bunker is still at play, which is another complication of as to whether they refer it to someone else elsewhere who watches it and kind of speeds it up. So I think if you're going to a bit like this stuff this weekend, if you're going to trial something, you should trial it in isolation and see how give it a chance to work. Because I guess if New Zealand and Australia are pushing it for this hard, you at least then can go back to them and say it didn't work.
Yeah. Whereas
now you're kind of giving it an out, and it's a bit of a fudge, but. It was very unpopular. I saw Ron O'Gara talking about this morning saying it was really a poor look for the sport. That's the 20-minute red card itself in isolation, that it's not strong enough punishment for acts of foul play. But it's all part of an idea of speeding up the game and not ruining contests. There's going to be the shot clock is down to 60 seconds for conversions. There's 30 minutes set for scrum. 30 seconds to set a scrum, 30 seconds to set a line out. It's quite similar to what's happening in GAA this weekend. It's trying to make it faster, more attractive.
Okay. The last day I was in here, we were talking about the Cheika suspension over the head injuries. This just feels like another sort of backward step, doesn't it? Against at a time when sort of rugby is fighting off this image that it has, that it's a dangerous sport to play. And I think O'Gara's point that it's not sending a strong enough message in terms of punishment for particularly, I mean, we mostly think of head tackles, don't we, when we think of red card in rugby. I mean, that's what we think about. This feels like it's a little bit of a softening.
Maybe. Yeah, okay, interesting. Your point about how it's more complicated for referees, I accept. But I think a world where there is the option for a 20-minute red card and then that player is replaced, I quite like that. I think there are more red cards in rugby now, and it does affect the game. I mean, I'm not one of those that says, well, game ruined. But like your heart sinks a little bit sometimes, World Cup final, 14 men. It's like, it's not, okay, we have to do it. I understand why we have to do it. player safety, but it's kind of, it is increasingly like an aspect of rugby where so many games have a red card. And I think if you're the player, the fact that you are off the field, let's be honest, all players are selfish fundamentally. You're off the field. You're suspended for the next game, most likely. I think that's still a healthy enough deterrent. And okay, a manager might think to himself, a coach might think, well, listen, nice one. Okay, let's batten down the hatches for 20 minutes, then I can get someone else on. Yeah, okay, but it's the player who's going to make the decision. John, is he going to take Fionn's head off and think, that's okay, I'll be off the pitch completely and suspended? I still think John's thinking twice about that. I wouldn't shoot this down.
But what if the guy you're after taking out, he's gone, he's left the field, he's gone for the rest of the game as well?
You still have the option as the referee to go, John, red. That was a disgrace, full red, 14 for the rest of the game. I think that little bit of option within might be good. Still enough of a deterrent, and if something is very serious, you definitely get a red card. I'm not saying lose the red card, but I think maybe that in-between option is worth exploring.
The NHL, it's odd to use the NHL as a parallel example, but the NHL traditionally always had two kinds of players.
Yeah.
It had the skillful players, your Wayne Gretzky's, etc., Mario Lemieux, etc., and then it had the killers.
Sort of like Junior GAA.
A bit like that. And the killers were there to protect the talent, the skillful players, and to beat the crap out of everybody else.
Mm.
And like, even though I think your point is well made, I think players are selfish and but not most rugby games aren't a final. So the idea is that like, sure, I want to stay on the pitch, I want to keep playing, but maybe it's a wet Wednesday and maybe my manager, I'm going to have players that are designed. These are the fighters, the scrappers. It opens the door to the possibility of something like that, I think.
And I do accept it,
It allows you to plan in discipline a little better.
You could certainly say, well, if we get their best player off the pitch, it's worth it.
It's a sacrifice worth making, and then the rest of the team looks at the guy who's gone
but
and well done.
I would trust the referees to take into account, you've just taken their best player out of the game. That looked deliberate to me. That's a red card.
I think that's a jump.
Do you?
Yeah.
Oh, God, I trust referees with that. That's interesting.
I mean, Richie McCaw was, the greatest seven of his generation because he could befuddle the referee into thinking, no, I'm not doing that. What are you talking about?
I know. It's hard to take someone out of the game without everyone knowing what you're doing.
No, but...
Rory, final rugby educated word.
That's a stretch.
From a rugby man.
I'm torn on it a little bit because I don't necessarily agree that a red card, with the premise that a red card ruins matches. Like that World Cup final was still compelling and New Zealand still nearly won it with 14. And if they had, they might have put the whole thing to bed. I'm open to looking at changes, but this does seem to all the stuff that John said about, the sport needs a better look, and this is not necessarily a better look. I think they were worried as well that if A punched B, he got a 20-minute red card. Like that's an old-fashioned red card offence. I think that's part of it. Is that remains a red card offence, but I didn't see this as one of rugby's the fact that a red card was a red card is one of rugby's major flaws. I think teams not adapting to the seriousness around head injuries, and New Zealand in particular, because they keep getting players sent off, is a much wider and more important issue, and this gives you a reason not to do that as much, and that's not a good thing.
Okay. You're looking at me with intent.
No, I agree with him.
Okay.
I agree with
Sorry,
him.
I thought you were about to say something profound, but you had nothing.
No. Rud nailed it. I got nothing.
We got to everything except you and your Saudi tennis, sorry.
Lads, Six Kings.
I don't even know what that is. But
Six
apparently
Kings is the most lucrative tennis tournament in history ever.
Right.
Six players playing in Saudi for £4.6 million sterling. The final is Yannick Sinner against Carlos Alcaraz on Saturday. No concerns whatsoever. There's no live PGA Tour split here. The tennis player, even despite, they've been complaining about a packed schedule all year. Similar to golfers who complain about, we play too much. But they all showed up to Riyadh to make the money.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you all very much. Really enjoyed that. Fionn Davenport, thank you. Rory O'Connor, thank you. John Greene, you got a paper to get ready. Let's get cracking. Thanks very much, fellas.
Thanks.
Good job.